This country was built on slavery, which means slaves built this country.
Tilled this land from sea to sea to sea. First it was rice, tobacco, sugar cane.
Then Whitney did his thing and cotton became king.
And we were its soldiers,
4 million strong,
fighting for America's freedoms, even though we remained America's slaves.
Built this country. The descendants of slaves continue to build this.
Slaves built this country. And we, the descendants of slaves in America, have earned reparations for their suffering.
And continue to earn reparations every moment we spend submerged in the systemic prejudice, racism, and
white supremacy that America was founded with and still has not atoned for.
Slaves built this country. Not only field hands, but carpenters, masons,
blacksmiths, musicians,
inventors built cities from Jamestown to New Orleans to Banneker,
Washington. 40 acres and a mule.
We'll take the 40 acres, keep the mule.
We made your families rich.
From the southern plantation heirs
to the northern bankers,
to the New England ship owners,
the founding fathers,
former presidents,
current senators,
the Illuminati, the New World Order.
Slaves built this country.
We had Tubman,
Turner,
Frederick D.
Didn't they say Lincoln freed the slaves?
But slaves were men.
And women. And only we can free ourselves.
Emancipation is not freedom.
Jim Crow, segregation, redlining, public schools feeding private prisons, where we become slaves again.
As we celebrate Juneteenth
for the umpteenth time,
our account is still outstanding.
Because this country was built on slavery, which means
slaves built this country.
And we demand our 40 acres and a mule.
About that,
you can keep the mule.
Keep the 40.
We're taking our freedom.
So will I give you all glory all days of my life. God of creation, there at the start, before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonders of light. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born, and the vapor of your breath, the planets fall. If the stars are meant to worship, so will I can see your heart in everything you've made. Every burning star, signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises, so will I. Yeah, so will I.
Yeah.
just disappear when you lost your life so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I. If creation still obeys you, so will I. So will I, so will I, so will I, so will I, so will I. So will I worship you, so will I give you glory, so will I magnify your name. You're the one who never leaves the one behind.
If the stars are made to worship,
If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. You're the one who never leaves the one behind. You're the one who never leaves the one behind.
Hey, good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome to another experience of Alkebulan Inspirational Sunday. I am Ajay the African, and we are at World of Alkebulan, and I thank you for chiming in. I know these past couple of weeks have been heavy on me. We've had some technical difficulties here at the World of Alkebulan, and I had to bear down because I lost all production and I had to literally build it back. And today is the sign of me being able to sit down, focus, and build World of Akiba back to what you see it to be. And Black History Month, I couldn't let my ancestors down. I couldn't let my ancestors down, nor the universe, nor the universe. The song you just heard was "So Will I," and I believe that comes from cross worship. If creation was made to worship you, obey you, to serve you, so will I. And we're gonna play that at the end because I want you to, after this lesson, I want you to hear those words again. I want you to hear those words all over again after this lesson and try to understand the power of that particular song. And that's what we're gonna get to. So we've been here in Black History Month and month. My mother always told me, make sure you pronounce the T and the H. Month. We say month. Well, Black History Month, right? And so I always and we're teaching at this particular point that it's Black history and African history. Black history is African history. It's a connection. It's not a separation. And so separating the two becomes a problem because you lose a lot of what you can gain out of knowing that it is actually the process of studying a complete vision or narrative of you. And narrative meaning the example of who you are as a people. So we say, you are, and last week, just to sum up or catch up, you are, your future is Black history. And you see the brother standing, thinking about African history, which is Black history, right? Who he was. His future is going to be Black history. His future, your future is Black history. You see the other one, right, where he's thinking of actually in front of him. So you have your what we call the Zumana, your past. He lives in his present and he's meditating on his future. It doesn't matter what area of time that we're discussing, past, present, and future, you're still Black history. You are a manifestation of the things that have happened before you. And everything you do right now is a manifestation of things that will happen in the days to come. Yes, time is actually connected. There is nothing that happened before you that doesn't, it all affects you. It all affects you one way or another. We're all interlocked. So when we're sitting down and we're taking our time and we use a month here. You say the government that we live in gives us a month of studying or honoring our history. This should not be a situation where only they give you 30 days, so you take your 30 days. And it's funny, I went to visit a church, and I had visited this church before previously, and when I visited then, nobody was wearing African garments. It was like I stood out. I have tons of African blazers. I walked up in there, African fly. Nobody. They were just wearing regular clothes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But then when I went during African History Month, almost every day had things posted and everything. And so they took their 30 days for real. So we may not study in special ceremonies and everything. We may not do this year round, but we're going to do this for 30 days. But then after the 30 days was over, where they go back to the regular conditioning, the regular programming. Ain't that something? And we're going to get into that too. So we want you to understand in this space that when you are looking at Black history, it is an extension of African history. Black history is an extension of African history. They try to get you to stop or start really like your existence on the planet started here. Because before you got to United States, you didn't matter, which is so untrue. It is so untrue. And if you was here last week, was it last week or week before last? Because again, we had technical difficulties, so we missed a week. If you were here in the last session, you would understand that this is all connected. It's all one. Your past, your present, your future, we all exist in the same time. We have to realize that we're studying both. And so in that space after that last week, well, before we get to that. And so I want you to understand why it is important to connect your moment in time now with the moment in time that your people lived before you to prepare you for your future. We're not the only ones. So everybody's talks about it, but we're going to have a brother. Well, I got something special for you to watch. So it explains it. Why is it important for you to not only study your American Black history or your American African experience, African Americans, right? We're African Americans. To study your African American experience, but also go back to your African experience. Connect the two. Here's why history is so important.
What you call Black history, what you call African history, are the missing pages of world history. Now, because I've now begun to study European history, I began to understand how African history was misplaced in the history of the world. And the one thing that I learned repeatedly, you cannot oppress a historical people. And once a people understand the nature of their role in history, they will not permit themselves to be oppressed. In order to oppress you, people must remove you from the respectful commentary of history. They must destroy your confidence and historical memory. The memory of what you was, so that you can be confused about what you are, and more confused about what you still must be and where you still must go.
The dangers of knowing your history only from slavery. When you feel like your history started from slavery, which was beyond words, you'll compare it to the disenfranchisement that our race continues to see today. You will subconsciously say to yourself, I know it's not good, but heck, compared to slavery, we're good. You'll become socialized and take disenfranchisement as being your norm. Don't believe me? It has happened and occurred in every single decade and every century since colonialism began. Heck, Harriet Tubman was the one who told us, I could have freed hundreds of more slaves if only they knew that they were slaves.
I could have freed hundreds of more slaves if only knew that they were slaves. And that segue, that information that we said comes to this point where we have our topic of the day, getting back to the source, close the circle. Now, the gentleman that you heard in the previous video, his name is Dr. Henry Clark. And if you see this picture, I'm going to show you how things are connected. Dr. Henry Clark is considered the godfather of African history. Went around talking. In this picture that I show you, or on African history or Black history, the gentleman right there you see is Jaramogi Baby Ajim. And Jaramogi Baby Ajim, for those who are in the church, there's no need to say it. But for those who are watching who are not in our community, good morning, Nicole. How you doing? I see you. For those who are not in our community, Jaramogi Baby Ajim is the founder of our church. And when he was having classes, African history classes, when he was having African spirituality lectures, when he was developing the concept of liberation theology, Dr. Henry Clark was seen in the audience taking notes. Dr. Henry Clark was then coming up with the concept of who God called him to be while he was listening to Jaramogi, taking notes. And he would go, and Jaramogi would always, he never, you didn't have to take it. Don't take it from me. Research it for yourself. And so Dr. Henry Clark was infused, and he went out and researched it for himself and became the godfather of Black history. Ain't that something? Wrote book after book after book after sitting in the classes of our Honorable Jaramogi Baby Ajim. And now in that space, after that scenario, I'm sitting down and I created our Black history is African history posts. And I kept saying, close the circle. Now, Tuesday night on the African Speaks, we talked about close the circle. And if you're a certain age, you probably wouldn't watch it, right? But if you are a little bit mature in your thinking, you did watch it. And we did discuss the issue of the circle, because I kept hearing that. Now, it happened to me previously in my life where God's told me to close the circle, which came up with the concept of the gathering. And we'll talk about that too. But then after that, close the circle was like he said, no, there's something more deeper in this space where I want you to understand it's also about African and American history. Close the circle where you don't just start from to get a full identity of who you are. You have to go beyond what the world has given you as a narrative, meaning give you as your own story. You have to create an experience where you start yourself from the beginning and just go around until you meet your beginning again. Meaning you come full circle. Full circle. We are not where God created us to be, but we about to get there. And so I started saying, close the circle. And I asked myself, what was so important about closing the circle? Because in our church community, we use something called the sacred circle. And when anytime we're getting together in the group we're sitting in, it's a circle of us. When we're doing devotionals, it's a circle of us. When we're gathering, the sacred circle. And then I sit down and, if you hold in prayer and you around a table, it's a circle. So even in history has a full circle. You need to have a full circle, full spectrum of what goes on. Now in a circle, there is no beginning and there is no end. So once energy happens within a circle, it just continues, becomes infinite. And so I sat down and said, I wanted to know what it meant. What does it? And I kept hearing the circle, circle, circle. So then I asked myself, what is so important about this shape? We discussed it a little bit Tuesday night, and I said, I'm going to be studying. I've been studying all week on this, and I'm about to break it down. Not today, because y'all are just getting it, but it's going to be, I'm slowly internalizing the things that I'm studying so that it enhances who I am. It enhances my concept of how I think. It enhances what I do. We don't just hear it for the sake of hearing it, feeling good for the moment. You want to be the greatest you that you could possibly be. So I internalized it. So I said, what is so important about a circle? And then as I started studying the circle, I came across this information called sacred geometry. You're like, what? Yes, sacred geometry. Why is it important for us to know the true beginning to where we can understand where we are to where we're going? And again, we said that there is no space and time. right? You are a manifestation of the past, the present, and the future. That's a full circle, past, present, and future. You're in the future before you even get there. What you just made it. What you just made it. Every second. The future is not years in front of you. The future is the next second. It's the next second. I'm in the future now. I'm in the future now. Every second, I'm always moving toward the future, and I'm compelled and moved by what happens in my past. Will determine how great my present is, and this is why time for us is so important. How you see yourself today is deeply important. And so when we started dealing with the issue of sacred geometry, I sat down and said, okay, so what is the focus of the circle? Why is the circle so sacred? Because in sacred geometry, they define the circle as the source. We always saying God is my source. That empty circle, that sphere signifies the presence of God. Wow. At one point, I didn't understand it. You know what I mean? Sacred circle. And because we all together, we holding hands. The circle signifies in sacred geometry. Let me set it up. It signifies the source, if you call it. You can call it the source. You can call it God. You can call it the Most High, Allah. Whatever phrase of word in any spiritual discipline, there is only one source, and all across the globe, this is the study. When we'll get there, that circle is the presence. It means the presence and power and experience of God. And anything that it said in the Bible, it says we live, move, and have our total being in God. God is not in some sky somewhere. It's an experience of divine consciousness. And so as I began to understand the source because we're understanding why but it's so important for us to study our history and close the circle. So Nicole is watching. She said, good morning. Nicole is from Jamaica. She lives in Canada. And being from Jamaica, Canadian, I guess you might be Afro-Canadian. In Jamaica, you just Jamaican, but you're Afro-Jamaican or Afro-Caribbean because the source of who you are is African. When you travel down who your DNA is and where they came from, you're closing the circle to get a deeper understanding of who you are in God. Traveling through time to understand where your people went gets you back to the source of you. If you were listening to the video from Dr. Henry Clark, you can't oppress a historical people. Historical, meaning that the source, the circle before time and creation, we were the first individuals, the first people created when the source began to manifest life. What? African people came straight from the source. We didn't come from any other place but the mindset of God. You are directly descendants from not just Africans. Africans are direct manifestations of God's thought. That's it. No other race can claim that because every other race came out of the African, and the African came directly out of the source, which is God. Now, when you sit down and we talk about this sacred geometry, and I'm in the process of internalizing all of this. These are the different shapes of the source and what manifests outside the source. So you got the seed of life, the tree of life, the flower of life. Then you have the golden ratio. You have the fruit of life. There is so much. It is so much. And then when you look at some of these symbols, you get all the other symbols that you may see walking. So the mind works from symbolism, right? And I don't want to go too deep here, right? But we're going to get deep as we go, because I'm going to start be dropping some of these, and I'm going to be sharing them with you, and I'm going to slowly educate you. But what we're trying to do is in this space is understand why studying African history, and then whatever region you in, because my friend Nicole, who's in Canada, she may not have to study American history. Why? Because she didn't live her life in America. She lived a life in Canada and in Jamaica. So she's going to understand the journey of African people. Why did they go to Canada? Because slavery was not really permitted in Canada. That's why they was traveling up. And there's a book where and it's a story where people would travel up to Oregon, because Oregon didn't want slaves. They said they didn't believe in slavery either, but they didn't want black people in the state. So you were allowed to stay there temporarily, only for 6 months. But then you had to leave, and they were hoping you were moving up to Canada that did not allow slavery. So what they were doing was, again, black folk everywhere is trying to get back to the source. And if you can get back to the source, you can understand who you are. That's the process. And so when you say, I'm saying close the circle, meaning that there is a break. There's a break in the way we think. There's a break in the way we live. There's a break in the way we view ourselves, where we don't get a clear picture of who we are in God. So they said, well, let's give it to them for 30 days, because after the 30 days is over, they break the circle. You don't get to go past slavery to see how great you are. You only see what we had to endure as a people coming out of slavery. And if my friend Nicole studies Afro-Canadian history, which will deal with the struggle of black people getting there, she'll have a more clear concept of who she is and what was the fight for, and how people had to get to the source. They were trying to find a place where they could be who God called them to be. And so in that space of doing that, getting to the source, well, I'm at my source now, and we are so far. People say, I'm there. Just because we have more freedom in this world does not mean we understand or we're connected to the source. So if you I say, can you name somebody and give, other than Nelson Mandela, can you name an African freedom fighter? Because even over there, they were trying to get back to the source, because they understood who we were. African history was, and then you realize, in some of us my age, when I was in school and apartheid was still going on, and I'm wearing stop apartheid and apartheid shirts through school. I was college. I became revolutionary in college when I began to seek my source, having an understanding of me. And so you was like, it's a not understanding African history destroys the computer system that God created in you. You are a human computer. The brain is the only CPU or computer that does never shut off until you even after you pass away. It's your consciousness never stops. This is just holding our consciousness. Now they say we use 10% of our brain, but you can actually access more of that when you tap into your source. Some of us are highly, either left or right brain. Now, when you're studying the source and you're studying sacred geometry, they show you how to activate right and left, and what happens when you activate right and left, and why they want to keep you from understanding who you are in God. But not studying your history, not studying American history and African history creates something inside your brain that keeps you from understanding who God called you to be. Right. Now, when it happens to a computer, when something breaks the cycle or breaks the circle where a brain can function from its complete understanding of who God called them to be, it's called a virus. So if you are like a human computer, not knowing your history is like having a virus inside you, because you begin to operate in a way that doesn't work. It doesn't manifest who you are. You don't ever get to experience how smart you are, how powerful you are, how fast you are. You don't realize how beautiful you are, how intelligent you are. I mean, how humble you could be. You don't get to anything when you don't embrace who you are in God by studying your history here and in history abroad. Because then after a while, you start studying. He said it. He said, I'm studying world history. The absence of African people or African history in the world it's you got it. When you start studying world history, you understand it. Why? Because Europeans all over the globe wanted to control the African in us. They wanted to kill the African in us. So they separate us from all of it. Not only did they separate us from wherever we are in the diaspora, they separated from us in Africa. Yes. Africa is full of a virus. That's why you always see these things that are happening, but you see people combating the virus. What? How do you combat the virus? Now, here's the thing. If you are like a computer and you're dealing with the source, right? If you hit F8 on a computer, I mean F12. If you hit F12 on any computer, you get to something called the source code. That wasn't supposed to pop up. But if you get to the music wasn't supposed to play. I'm sorry, I thought I fixed that. If you get to any computer and you hit F12, if you listening to me right now and you go to your keyboard, if you're looking on your phone, that's one thing, but when you get to the computer, hit F12. Means function. F means function. There's a function. And in this function, I'm going to get you to the source code. So you're going to see the code it took to create whatever website you're on. And it changes for every website. Why? Because each website is a manifestation of somebody's thought process. I am designing this particular web page to look and feel and do this particular thing. And so if you hit F12, you see the code written down. And that's just like a human being. When you go through, you have your culture, you have your heritage, your tradition, your ways, your history is your source code. It shows you where you came from in God, how you got to be. And it helps you understand where you got to go. Your source code. So there is nothing created in earth that does not, on this planet, that does not have a source. However, when you listen to the song, So Will I, mankind has to make a decision to accept his source code. We're the only species where God says, I'm going to give you an option to either follow your source code or not. And then when white folks or Europeans understood this, if we take this people and we alter their source code, they will be enslaved to us forever. And we still are, in a lot of ways, still enslaved to a European society. Why? Because we have not gone back to our source code. Our source code is God. We're still thinking the same way they wanted us to. The white folks created a society where there's a break in the circle, where they can seep in and change what God planted in you. And we said, no, studying our history helps us tap into the true source code of who we are. Because he said, you cannot oppress a historical people. If we were knowing that we are the first beings that came from God, let's get it. We came from divine thought. Wait a minute. You trying to tell me my spirit came into being, into a race, into a culture, into a people that came directly from God, and then everybody else came from us? Then why are we not helping the world be better rather than sustaining what the world has? Why are we not doing these things that God would require us so that things could change? It's because of the source. And this is why I'm always telling you, and will always say it, and we will get more and more into this as time goes on. I will hit every letter, that we are God's science, we're God's technology, we're God's engineering, his artwork, and his mathematics. We are the steam of God. It is built in who and whose we are. It's a part of our DNA. Period. It's just a part of our DNA. And that's why when we tap into that spiritual side of us that connects to God, things pop easy, things happen, things change. You put a black person who's becoming aware of who they are in God in any aspect of their life, you watch them excel exceedingly. European society can't understand why we still live it. Because we function from a place of knowing when we don't even know. Our subconscious functions from a place of knowing our source when you keep trying to tell us we're not. But that's why the slaves were able to endure it, because they knew that you could feel you're greater than what the world is telling you. Sometimes you can just feel it. And that's the source trying to reclaim itself, trying to push the virus of the world out. So now it doesn't matter. When we sit there and we talking about Black history, it's spiritual history. It's African history. It's God history. This is a God people. This is a love affair and love story of a Black man and a Black woman who created humanity, trying to get back to who God called us to be. So it doesn't matter who in Black history you decide to study. It's not going to matter their faces, where in America, what they created. It's not going to matter what discipline they focused on. What matters is all of them, every person you can think of, is trying to get back to the source, is expressing the God within. And so we're celebrating those Africans who were put in a slave environment, who said, where they stopped our relationship and connection to the Creator and said, you're going to be what we want you to be. Well, the faces that you see and the faces that you study will be faces that say, we know who we are in God, or we're becoming aware of who we are in God. And sometimes, and if you can sit down and speak to some of them, and they will have a lot of awareness of African history and who they are. They're kings and queens and warriors of who they are. And so when you see this, now you understand what I talk about. Now, and it's different. We got to an extent, but we didn't get to an extent of responsibility. However, it's still Black people. If you have the first of anything in your family, or you have someone in your family that has achieved a certain life that gives you advice on how to be great and creative, or influence you spiritually to seek a higher understanding than just what your situation is. It doesn't matter, because they're seeking the source. And that's when we talk about, that's the rise of the African. That's the rise of the African spirit that is inside you. The being that is within you, the one that breathes, it moves. It is that rise of the African. It is that connectedness of a people, that Pan-African movement. That's what that is. But if you only stop in America, you never get to your greatest level of history, so that you know there ain't nothing I can do. You sitting there talking about you celebrate an engineer. They're not the first Black engineer. Go to Africa. Africa was engineering stuff, but way before white folks. Architecture. They're not the first architects. Africans were. Agriculture. They're not the first agriculturalists. Africans were. Scientists. They're not the first scientists. Africans were. What they are, they're the first ones after slavery to reconnect to the African genius that is inside of them. Do not open the circle. Close it. Close your circle so you can see yourself inside your brother. Last session we said, the best way to get to connected, you got to see your brother as yourself. Love that God with all the heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your brother as thyself. Go back and understand that we are an extension of the motherland. We are a people who came straight from from the divine thought of the Creator. And we had one of our offspring came against us to take our culture because it was too powerful. They did not want us ruling the world. And we really didn't have any desire to rule the world. We were just kind hearted. They thought we might. We didn't. And they wanted to rule the world. Why? Because Africa had so many resources to share. They lived in ice ages. They lived in cold places. They didn't have as much variety of resources. So they said, let's take over Africa and control the world. And that's what Europeans did. Africa now, as a nation, is taking it back. EAC. EAC is the fourth largest nation in the world. That's the East African community. Fourth largest. You got United States, you got Russia, China, and East Africa. I think Great Britain is in there somewhere. Top 5. East Africa is number 4. I think Great Britain is bigger than Russia. Y'all can check that. But what we're talking about is development and the rise of the African youth. And so even for the sake of Black History Month, Netflix had put out a whole series of Black History Month so you can watch certain things now. I tell you, I think I watched this right here. I think I watched this like, man, just yesterday alone. Yeah, 7 times. Yeah, I love this. Why? In our journey over here in the Americas, it was Black women who were the root of resolving or fighting for our history. Of course, when you see, and you see these faces, you see, they equal it out, Black men and Black women, in terms of those individuals that you can celebrate for Black History Month and African History Month, right? However, when you look in our communities, now you might have seen individuals and they share it, but when you look in our communities, that's where it counts. Who is building community? That's where it counts. So when you talk about who's building community, who's keeping the family together, it's not the Black man. And I'm a Black man, and I gotta face the truth to close my circle, so that I know what to do in my present, so that I know how to manifest things in my future. But it was the women, and it is the women that keep us together. Y'all don't realize this, but the world is slowly taking apart our women as mothers. Then they're killing the concept of mother and community. I have a friend who brags about how she don't want kids, and she in her early 30s, and she doesn't understand that she's killing the concept of community. Now, just because you don't want them, don't mean you should go advertising that you don't want them. That's your personal effort. Because of social media, everybody can talk about whatever they want to talk about. Hence, hot world of Alkebulan. I could do it too. I didn't see individuals posting things like I have my brother, Tracy Sanders. One love, man. I think my first time I probably even mentioned you on the show. I need to have a conversation with you live one day. Right? And my brother, Tracy Sanders, always posting about his family, always posting about his relationship with his wife, always posting about his kids, everything he's doing. And it touches my heart because we came from the same place, and we've been in the same houses where daddy won't in the house. Mama was there, and mama kept it down until we became Black men, not Black males. You have tons of males, but you have very few men who build family, who build community, who build empire. So when I wanted to see, I said, I want to close the circle. Let me see the history of Black women who fight for family. And Viola Davis came out with that movie. Let me show you what the circle looks like closed. Why Black women over here build community, build family. Very few. Now, some of us, sometimes we get that mental illness and we might, abandon our babies. We've had that before. But Black women in the innate structure cannot let go of their code, the source code of God within them that helps them build. Now, when you see strong Black women this Black History Month, won't you flip it back and see if your mama lets you watch The Woman King? And if you're old enough if they feel that they can talk you through The Warrior, you see she got a sword in the hand because she had to fight off Europeans. She had to fight off other Africans who was poisoned by European thinking. Europeans threatening the king. saying if you're not going to sell me slaves, I can't you won't be protected. It's like white folks going to come in and go to war with you. So then the king looked at him and said, well, if you are no good to me, then you are no longer protected either. And then the white man kind of changed his attitude and looked at him. Why? Because he in the middle of Africa. You can bring an army if you want to, but you here right now, you would have to leave in order to bring it. And if I snap my fingers right now, your head gets cut off. And he changed his tone. Because the king was saying, we will no longer sell you Africans so that we don't have to go to war with you. We will sell you other things. And that was the whole concept was the fact that women fought harder than the men did. Not just as hard. I'm gonna say they fought harder. This was a beautiful thing. And when I saw it, I saw my mama, I saw my grandmama, I saw my auntie grandma Lottie. I saw everybody, every woman that, One Love Miss Knight, I saw you. One Love Miss Sanders, I saw you. I saw all of them. Miss Holloman, Jamal Chambers, Miss Chambers, one love to you. Miss Bennett, one love. I saw the women in who had parts of holding me, developing me, because they were the ones fighting for me. I had to close the circle to see where that spirit came from. And then you get an understanding of why we are the way we are. When you see what we were fighting through and what we're fighting toward, we're getting back to our source. So it doesn't matter who you celebrate them all. They're all getting back to the source of God in them. Now we have a limit, because none of them combine their money to create an experience of liberation. That might be my job. Our job is to combine the finances of the millionaires who got the bread to build black schools across the country, one syndicated black schools, to build hospitals across the country, to have, my church is building farms across the country. We're supposed to be building all black everything. It'll take us a minute. We got 5 more years before we make another move. And when we make this next move, exactly the reason why we do what we do is because we're connecting back to our code source, our source code, which is God. So we are closing the circle because we're getting back. Everybody you study, close that circle. The red, the black, the green. The red is for the blood of who we are. The black is for the people. The green is for the land. It doesn't even have to be a place. It's within. We say, I'm not in Africa, but Africa is sure in me. And so when we're dealing with the circle, understand that this is sacred. It's sacred geometry when you're closing the circle. It is the experience of getting back to God, pushing out what keeps you away from your source, your sacred geometry, the circle in which God exists, within you, Because God, you can't change God outside you, but they can change how you connect to God inside you. And one of the ways they did it is disconnecting you from your history, your historical greatness. We will connect you to your spiritual greatness and your historical greatness here at World of Alkebulan. So y'all keep connected. If there's somebody y'all need who needs to hear this, y'all hit me up and tell me what issues they have, and I create something that they can listen to. But every time you're connecting to the source code, your imagination is opening up and you're finding out what God has called you to do and be. We all belong to God. We all have gifts, talents, creativity in us from God to do something special for God. And if you can study your history for a whole year, you give me 365 days and you learn about one person. And that doesn't mean you got to read a book. The internet makes it easy. I want you to select, here's homework. I'm already doing my homework for the sacred geometry, and I told people on African Speaks that they had homework, and hopefully they did it, because this week we might kick the door down with this sacred geometry. I want you to do homework. All you have to do is Google famous African American quotes, and I want you to look at how their brains clicked when they talks about overcoming their situations and circumstances to experience more of who they are in God. A lot of them didn't really always make it to the fullest extent because the world is strong, but we're getting closer because they're calling what this generation a woke generation. But I don't know. We had a lot of generations before us that was so more intellectually inclined than we are. Sorry. But what I want you to take a look at is, in closing the circle, I want you to rethink about the song that we had, which was called So Am I. Because in that song, it says, if the stars were made to worship, so will I. If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. If the oceans roar, your greatness, so will I. If everything exists to lift you high, so will I. If the wind goes where you sent it, so will I. If the rock cries out in silence, so will I. If the sum of all our praise still falls shy, then we'll sing again 1,000,000,000 times, man, 100 billion times. We're going to keep doing it. Why? Because we're reconnecting. Everything outside the human experience can only reflect the source. In this human experience, God has given us a choice. Will you give me the praise and worship according to who I am for you? The best way to get yourself to start doing that is to start seeing the greatness in the people that you're from. They said you cannot impress a historical people. We historically, in our history, gave God more praise than you can ever imagine. And we have influenced the entire globe with that. And with that being said, that this is what we are called to do and be, to give God praise according to get back to the source, closing that circle, celebrating all of it, taking the history, all of it. I'm gonna have to call my friend Nicole and see if they have a Black History Month in Canada. I had someone tell me the other day, they saw something called being Black in Japan and how without an identity people get lost. And I said, yeah, you can't really find who you are in God being and enjoying another culture. So when you enjoy your culture, I want one person a day, every time you hit the computer, do a African history quote and see a new person and see how they think and realize how they were fighting to say if the whole universe gives God praise according to who they are, so will I. And when you say so will I, you will study, you will look at studying your African history and your American history, or your Afro-Caribbean history, or your Afro-Brazilian history, or your Afro-European history. You will study it all with a different fervor. And with that being said, I'm going to say this. We got together, and it's been a journey, but we got together as a group in my community to put on something called The Gathering, to help develop and move the Spirit of God in you in a way that you can fight for your soul alive. You can work for your soul alive. You can get to that point where you're experiencing the presence and power of God in you, and you will realize that every day of your life is an experience in African history. You are the extension of all those who have came before you, and everything you do is a manifestation of everything that they did. Close the circle, connect it, give God praise, be great. This happens today at 4:00. So yes, I will be back. And I'm hoping you, in your mind, you are saying, so will I. Let the African in you rise. One love.
So will I. 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 days of my life. God of creation, there are the start before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonders of light. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. And the vapor of your breath, the planets fall. If the stars are meant to worship, so will I. I can see your heart in everything you've made. Every burning star, a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises, so will I. Yeah, so will I.
God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty your voice. Once you are spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. Yeah, yeah. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath. Invite the deep pursuit of what you say. If the jar of you so nature so alive, I can see your words in everything you say. Every man just try the colors of your face. If creation still obeys you, so alive.
100 billion failures disappear when you lost your life, so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you, so will I. If creation still obeys you, so will I. So will I, so will I, so will I, so will I, so will I. So will I worship you, so will I give you glory, so will I magnify your name. You're the one who never leaves the one behind.
If the stars are made to worship,